All right. Good evening. Welcome to the meeting. Call to order. Pledge of allegiance. All right. Welcome. The board president to advise members of the audience that they may address the board regarding agenda items after the superintendent's report. Only those members of whose names and addresses are listed on the sign-in sheet available prior to the start of the meeting will be recognized during new business. The chairperson will limit discussion of any item by the public to 3 minutes in order for the board to expeditiously conduct its business. Mr. Dolan, the superintendent report.
Thank you very much, President Carney. Tonight, we're going to have the second presentation of the budget with Mr. Harrison, but we're going to do something a little bit different. Instead of the usual superintendent's report, we're going to cover a tremendous amount in new business. The board has a number of questions from the public, so there'll be factual information and very important information in new business. Before I turn it over to Mr. Harrison, though, I think we need to take a moment, because it was a year ago today, almost to the day, when our world changed. And, you know, I wrote something that I'm going to read to so I keep my thoughts together. But it is very important for people to understand we are moving forward, and we are going to be better in spite of what we've been through. But I'm going to ask everyone to please take some time this weekend to reflect upon and mourn what we have lost over the last 365 days. Whether our losses were human, economic, or simply the loss of normalcy in our day-to-day interactions with our family and friends, the losses hurt us all. Whether through the ultimate loss of a loved one or the loss of the simple security in going to the supermarket, we have all suffered greatly. But the best way to honor those we have lost and some of the innocence that we've lost is to move forward. It is not to become what we condemn, but to move forward. And I repeat, it is not to become what we condemn. We must find the good in the opportunities that arise from adversity. This adversity that was called COVID. As we turn our clocks ahead this weekend, let the turning of the clocks symbolize us springing back to life and moving back together again, supporting each other. I am certainly looking forward to springing ahead with all of you, and I think it's apropos now to turn it over to Mr. Harrison, who's going to tell us how we are going to put the 2021-22 school year together in that what we call our budget. So, Mr. Harrison, you're up.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dolan. Before I get started, I would like to once again thank the Board of Education, Mr. Dolan, my colleagues and staff helping us get to the point of the second budget presentation. It takes a lot of effort on a lot of people's part, and I'd just like to recognize them at this point in time. Now, there are very few changes to today's presentation. Two of them are actually on this page. It says budget presentation number 2 and the date of March 11th. So we'll have to keep our eyes peeled for the third change. Of course, with the recent signing of the stimulus, we have yet to receive new information on state aid from the governor. We hope to get that in the coming days, and that'll be addressed in the next presentation. So much of what you see here will be repetitive information, but still important, and I'll zero in on some of those items. So we'll address the revenue first with a look at state aid, property taxes, and the revenue budget. Then we'll move into some of the accomplishments that we've achieved over the past several years. Then we'll talk about the expense side of the budget, and then finally wrap up with the budget timeline. So this page reflects the governor's proposal Again, it's prior to the events of the past couple of days in Washington. However, there are some very important pieces of key information in this analysis. So in the governor's proposal, it looks like total district support from the state level is being relatively flat at 0.19%. However, there are some very key changes to how the budget was put together for this year. The first item is the $3.2 million or $3.3 million decrease in local district funding adjustment. So what's happening there is that the state is transferring some of its funding responsibilities from the state to the federal level. So the same dollar amount is shown below for $3.3 million, and that's the Fed replacing the shortfall from the state's contribution to our budget. The concern there is that we've seen this in the past, and what usually happens is that once the federal funding dries up, the state is not quick to return us to normal funding. It usually takes a period of 5 years. So we are concerned that there'll be a fiscal cliff starting in the next 2 years. In addition, the other thing I'd like to point out is in services aid, the governor is combining 11 different categories of aid, and these are what are formerly known as expense-based aids. So as you spend more money, you get more state aid, or if you spend less money, you get less state aid. He's now freezing that category, so regardless of what his spending is in the future, our state aid is going to remain at the same levels. So there's a lot of concern there because the two key components, and you'll see it on the next screen, in that category is BOCES aid and transportation. Both categories are going to increase, if only for inflation or other issues. Regardless of what those increases are, our state aid is going to remain frozen. And just one other thing I'll point out on the next screen about transportation aid. In addition, for the first time ever, state aid is including the STAR payments. These are the reductions in property taxes that the community gets. So when we, for instance, bill the town for $1,000 worth of property taxes, the community may pay $700 and the state backfills it with $300. But what's happening is now the governor is now gaining control of those funds, and instead of giving us back $300 to make us whole, maybe giving us $150. So that's just an example of what what is happening in that category. So we have to keep an eye on that as well. And then finally, so again, in summation, state aid, total district support is relatively flat at 0.19%. So this screen shows you the aid categories I spoke about that are being combined. And I highlighted both BOCES aid and transportation aid because the 21-22 budget from the governor's proposal is based upon our budget for next year. So in the event that we don't fully spend our budget, we're not going to get aided upon that. So I'm concerned for about another $400,000 to $500,000 in aid that may not be received as part of the governor's budget. And affecting us going forward, I'll say it again, is that regardless of what our spending is going to be from year to year to year, our amounts could be frozen at the 2021-22 levels. So we have a big concern there. So I spoke a little bit earlier about the funding cliff. So the last time that happened, and these are actual East Islip numbers here, you'll see that in 09-10 our state aid dropped by somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 million. And that was because the state backfilled us with federal dollars, which dried up, and we didn't get back to that level again until 2016-17. So we see the same thing happening now with that $3.3 million and the potential for another funding cliff. And you see that in the 21-22 to 22-23 projection, that decrease of $3 million. So looking at the property tax cap calculation, the bottom line here is that our allowable tax levy, without having to get a 60% vote, is at 1.5%, or a $1,081,000 increase over the current year's tax levy. And there are several factors impacting our tax levy cap. The tax levy is able to grow by a tax-based growth factor of 1.009, which lends $647,000 as an increase to this equation. Pilot payments, those are the payments that are being made in lieu of taxes, are going up by $14,000 next year. And when you're having an increase in pilot taxes, pilot payments, that inhibits your ability to raise taxes because you have this other revenue source. This agreement is expiring at the end of the next school year, and I did speak with the town of Islip. Right now, there is no indication whether or not that agreement's going to be renewed, but I did ask him to keep in touch with me throughout the next several months as more information becomes available, but he had nothing at his level that indicated that it was going to be one way or the other. So what I'm saying there is when we're sitting here next year, we're going to be losing potentially $613,000 in revenue, which would be added to the tax levy calculation and could increase taxes further. The next set of numbers is referencing the local share of capital projects. A lot of things are going on there. The old debt is expiring from the old bond, and new debt is coming in as well as new state aid. And then finally, the CPI growth factor in this equation is 1.23%. So when you put all these items together, our tax levy cap allowable is 1.5%. Now keep in mind, each district has their own calculation, their own number, and they vary from district to district. However, this is what our number is going into next year. So this bar graph just charts out the comparison between what the tax levy cap could have been versus what it was in terms of the tax levy. So going back to as early as 15-16, the tax levy cap could have been as high as, well, it was 2.3%. However, we went out at a 0.96% increase. And that trend carries through 2020-21. This year, we held the tax levy flat from the prior year. However, we could have taxed it as high as 3.83%. The budget that we're presenting tonight is supported by a 1.5% tax levy increase, which is the cap for next year. This chart, the first line, the higher line, is the tax levy cap for each individual year, and the second line is what we actually went out for the tax levy. So for this year, well, for next year, 21-22, right now, the levy and the cap are at the same amount. Last year, we could have went up as high as $74.6 million, but we went out at 71.9. So that's, I'm sorry, $2.7 million that was not taxed to the community, and this is showing the annual impact of each of those decisions. The next slide actually shows you what the cumulative impact is over the past several years. So what this is showing is if we went to the tax cap every year, 21-22, our tax levy would have been as high as $81 million. But as we've shown on the previous screen, we're projecting a $72.9 million tax levy. So this is the cumulative effect of being below the tax levy cap in all the years that are charted here. So taking a look at the taxpayer and how they've been impacted, with the 1.5% increase that's currently supporting the budget, we're still at the same level of school tax as was in the 2014-15 school year. Those two boxes are shaded so that you can see that. $7,686 is the average school tax as compared to $7,680 in 2014-15. So summarizing the revenue budget, we can see that 60% of our budget is supported by property taxes, 28% by state aid. The next largest contributor is the money that's being appropriated from our savings accounts to support the budget, which is roughly 6% or $6.7 million. So again, that's money that's coming out of reserves to help support the budget. So the next 2 pages, I'll let people go through these on their own, but you can see pretty much across the district, we've touched each area with significant improvements, whether it's technology with the one-to-one devices and smart boards, or health and safety with all the COVID expenses we've had this year, additional guards, security cameras. Moving on to the instructional side, we've introduced new programs with the cosmetology room and the program. We've added elementary clubs. We've increased our spending quite a bit on the athletics and music and arts side. And we've also made some key additions to our infrastructure with upgrades throughout the district. So all this has been accomplished while keeping the tax rate relatively stable since 2014-15. Moving on to the expense side of the budget, this screen looks at the salary drivers and the changes from year to year. So on all the salaries, we've obviously moved our staff on the various step schedules that we're required to do. We built in retirement teachers, and we have the addition of a STEAM teacher. So subtotal for salaries were less than 1% increase, $490,315. Moving on to the benefits side, we did have quite a few retirements coming out this year. So when we have retirements, we maintain those staff members' health insurance, but we also have new staff coming in to replace them. So we had to add their health insurance policies, or anticipation of their health insurance policies for next year. So that is built into the 2.68% increase, as is small increases on the TRS and ERS premiums for next year. ERS is going from 16.1% to 18.1%. And TRS is going up from 9.53% to 9.8%. So that's all factored into the employee benefits side, as well as the increase in medical expenses on their premiums for next year. Overall, salary and benefits is going up 1.42%, or $1.2 million. Sorry, didn't advance the screen. These are the other non-salary related expenditures. There's quite a bit of movement here. I'll point out some of the highlights. On the equipment and capital outlay side, expenses are projected to drop $1.2 million, and that's essentially in the area of technology, where we had a lot of spending in the 2021 budget, as well as in the buildings and grounds areas. So those 2 areas make up that decrease of $1.2 million. On the utility side, we're dropping down $110,000 as a result of our solar project. That is not reflective of the total projected savings. However, we do have new lighting and electrical things happening, especially the lights at the field. So we don't yet have a solid projection on what those increased expenditures are going to be. So in the subsequent budget for 22-23, we'll be better adjusting the rest of that amount. This school year marks the end of the state aid repayment on building aid that we had to repay the state, so that's going down by $449,000. Moving on to furniture repair, which is going up by $206,000. That's mostly related to univentilator repairs throughout the district. That'll help us maximize our savings from our energy performance contract. And then moving on to tuition, that's going down for several reasons. One is based upon actual special ed placements anticipated for next year, as well as a decrease in charter school students. We had a couple of students going charter schools, but they're not going to be here for the 21-22 school year. Moving on to debt service, there's a lot of things happening in that category. We have the old bond, which is coming to a close next year, which debt service payments are going to drop by $5 million, but offsetting that decrease is the debt service being brought on for the new projects, the energy performance contracts, the capital projects relating to the bond projects. So that's all coming together over the next year or two, and that's what's representing that difference there. So overall, expenses are going up by 2.2 6.29%, or $353,000. So the budget being proposed, or being discussed at this point, is $120.8 million, an increase of $353,000. All right, so these charts, again, have been in previous presentations. It shows the percentage of each budget driver to the total budget. So when we look at salary benefits, it's at 73.4%, which is up slightly over last year of 72.58%. Moving to the rest of the budget, that represents 26.6%, and all the things we spoke about on the previous slides are shown here, and the percentage contribution to the total budget. But for the non-salary expenditures, it's 26.6%. So the next chart has some historical data, and the percent increase column is comparing the tax levy from year to year. And if you look at the 5-year average, our tax levy is going up an average of 0.72% a year. And our budget, as you can see, has been relatively flat for 3 years running, from $120.3 million to $120.8 million. Very small increases across the board. And we are contributing again $6.7 million from appropriated fund balance to support the budget for next year, which is our highest level we've had appropriated in comparison to previous years. All right, so this is the calendar of events for the remaining time frame. Our next presentation will be at the hearing May 4th. Certainly, if we have more information at the budget adoption, well, we will have more information at budget adoption. We'll present updated slides to reflect the changes in state aid from the governor. The election is May 18th, and right now the indication is that we'll be holding an election by machine and also providing absentee ballots for those who request them. But there'll be in-person voting on May 18th from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., supplemented by absentee ballots for those who qualify for one. All right, so at this point, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to.
I have a question on transportation. This year, did we have less buses than last year? And in 21, 22, are we gonna have more buses or less buses? Because it seems to me that the 5 million for doesn't change, so. Did we have too many buses this year?
No, we didn't. We kept the routes the same as they would be in a normal school year. So that'd be the same number of buses that we had prior to the pandemic, and we'll also have the same number of buses going to next year.
Even though there were less kids coming to school, we had the same buses?
Yes, we did. We planned the routes as if they were the same as they were previously, because we were trying to also not have a large number of kids on the buses in the early part of the years. So there was no decrease in buses. We ran the same routes,
Okay.
and we'll have the same routes for next year. You're welcome.
Mr. Harrison, appropriated fund balance. I assume the more that you take out of reserves, the less reliance on taxes, correct?
Yes,
So when I see many years we went 2 million, 3 million, but you're taking $6.7 million out of reserves this year to apply towards the budget?
yes.
And that's about a 20% increase from last year, correct? From 5.3?
I haven't done the math, but yes, it
All right.
yes, it equates to that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Can you just review the bond revenue versus that increase on the one slide? So it looks like we have $1 million additional, but when our fiscal advisors reviewed, they did confirm that we are tax neutral, because it doesn't show on that slide, but we will get state aid on the work
Yes.
that was performed.
You're exactly right. The slide you're referencing with the increase in debt service is only part of the equation. That's on the expense side of the budget. On the other side of the budget is the increase in state aid that we're expecting, and all those numbers have been reviewed and developed with the assistance of our fiscal advisors that made the presentations during the bond phase when we were going for vote.
Great. And we're going to have another presentation on the bond work when, Mr. Dolan?
We're hoping the end of April, beginning of May, we can maybe have a meeting over at the high school and be able to, have a bigger crowd.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, actually for Mr. Manzo. I see the STEAM teachers coming back, correct? I know we put that on hold because kids weren't in school and they weren't going to be here, but I see that in the budget.
That's correct.
And also the reading teachers, I believe we used them this year to be virtual teachers, but they're going to be coming back and being back in the elementaries, correct?
Right now, the plan is to move everyone back to with their original role, yes.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? No? Thank you, Mr. Harrison, for the budget presentation. Mr. Dolan, did you have anything else for the
Just a
superintendent's
couple
report?
quick things. And again, on the theme of, getting back to normal, I do want to emphasize what Mr. Harrison said. We do anticipate a $4 million hole in the budget next year. And we're surmising that because that's what we anticipate our federal support to be this year. But in the face of that, I think it's interesting, Mr. Zachary's last question, we are looking to return to normal. We're looking, to put the STEAM teachers back in, have the reading teachers go back to teaching reading. That we made sacrifices this year, but even though we're facing, what sounds like a daunting task, I think that, we have, and I give Mr. Harrison a lot of credit, we've managed the money correctly, and, we're going to be able to, we want to restore the programs and move forward. And, again, keeping with just a quick few things here, because we have restarted to return to normal. I want to congratulate, and normally we'd have them here at the meeting. The boys wrestling team were league champs this year. Girls basketball team, league champs this year. I give a lot of credit to the girls bowling team. And, in the face of adversity, they were county champions, and they dedicated it in memory to their coach, and our friend Harold Cooley. And the girls carried that burden all year long, but they turned it into a positive, losing their coach, but still, soldiering on. And the boys, county champions, 5 years in a row, quite an accomplishment, and something that I'm particularly proud of. Tomorrow night, actually tomorrow afternoon, we are recording our play. It's going to be the play is going to be virtual, but we are fortunate that we're going to be able to get parents into the auditorium to, I think it's going to be a very interesting experience. I'm looking forward to it, but everybody agrees. That the kids deserve an audience, the parents deserve to see. The teachers have worked very hard with the kids. So tomorrow is a big step for us, and again, it's exciting. And I think if we had known we were going to be able to have an audience, we may have prepared differently, but I love the spirit that the teachers and the kids had. They said, well, we're doing it this way, we'll bring them in, and I think that's a very, very nice message. Spring is here, and we're going to have, it's going to be a great play. Everybody's going to be able to watch it virtually. We'll be pushing that information out, but it's being recorded tomorrow, and it's being recorded with an audience. So it's another milestone on the road back. So I have a lot of questions to answer in new business, about school and where we're headed. So I'll turn it back over to you, Mrs. Carney.
Thank you. At this point, do we have any public comment on agenda items only? No? If not, we will move on to certified personnel. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education approves the resignations, terminations, leave of absence, position abolition, employment appointments, tenure appointments, and salary changes in accordance with applicable provisions of education law and civil service law as cited in the certified personnel attachment. Can I get a motion? Discussion? All in favor? Non-certified personnel. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education approves the resignations, terminations, leave of absence, position abolition, employment appointments, tenure appointments, and salary changes in accordance with applicable provisions of education law and civil service law as cited in the non-certified personnel attachment. You get a motion?
Motion.
Discussion?
I'm going to vote no for 5 through 8, Mr. President.
Okay. So we'll separate voting for numbers 1 through 4 and numbers 9 through 14. All in favor? For items 5 through 8, all in favor? And Mr. Montori is a no. So. And at this point, we have a consent agenda. Would anyone like any items removed from the consent agenda at this time? No? The consent agenda passes. 9:18, donation to Timber Point PTA. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education accepts the donation of 4 basketball racks and 25 4-pack rainbow balls for the Timber Point PTA, from the Timber Point PTA. This donation is valued at approximately $750. This donation will be used to enhance the students' physical education experiences while being COVID safe. You got a motion?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Thank you to the Timber Point PTA. Appropriation changes. Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education approves the attached list of appropriation changes. I got a motion?
Motion.
Discussion?
Great appropriation change.
Yes.
Very positive.
All in favor? Okay, old business. At this point, do we have any trustees with old business?
I think I'm bringing up all mine and new.
No? Okay. All right, on to new business. The first item of new business is, Mr. Manzo, would you like to review the policy?
Yes, on December 23rd, Assembly Bill A 5240A was signed into law amending state civil rights law and education law to make all single occupancy bathrooms located in public places, including schools, gender neutral. The law does not require schools to build new gender neutral bathrooms. However, existing single occupancy bathrooms must remove any signage designating bathrooms as male or female and must put up signage indicating that it's all genders. This will go into policy number
8400?
8400.
Didn't we already practice that? I know, being in the buildings, that there were gendered.
We started that, but that goes into law March 23rd, and we had to have a policy in place.
Okay, and do we have many that still need to be identified, or are they all?
They are voted and
signage is done?
identified
Yeah.
by Anthony. Thank you,
Perfect.
Anthony.
I have a question. So in other words, if a boy wants to go with his girlfriend into a bathroom, there's no problem?
There are single-use bathrooms. They're single-use bathrooms, one-person bathrooms.
Oh, it's a one person?
Yes, correct.
And who's gonna watch the bathroom to make sure that one person goes in?
It's a single-use bathroom, so if there's a monitor monitoring the bathroom, that's who will be there monitoring the bathroom.
So it's a one person?
Correct.
Thank you very much.
Any other discussion? Okay, so additional new business?
All right, Mr. Dolan, you ready? Been a long 2 weeks.
Well, do you want me to do the questions that came in from the public first, or do you guys want to talk first? No, go ahead. I'm just asking. We have a couple of things from community members. Okay. The first one is from Mrs. Keeney. Is boys middle school volleyball in the budget for next year? I know that equipment has already been purchased.
Yes, it was actually in the budget for this year, but middle school sports are going to be the fall season and the spring season, basically the outdoor sports. So the board made a commitment, and we started with the boys volleyball team, and this is the last piece to the puzzle. So next year, we have uniforms, we have equipment, and we will have middle school boys volleyball next year.
Okay, the second question was Allison Simonetti. In regards to all students having to return to school by the beginning of May, can you please advise us as to how you will accommodate the students who cannot wear masks all day? My 3 daughters are virtual for this reason. They were getting headaches, feeling dizzy, and sleeping for long hours after school. If COVID remains a threat to the point that students are forced to wear face masks and now face shields for over 7 hours a day, then virtual learning should remain an option, and students should not be forced to return to that environment.
We're going to delve a little more into this. Mr. Carpluck had some questions about it, but suffice it to say, we are looking to move away from virtual school on the secondary level, and looking to go to more of a medical model, which I'll explain when Mr. Carpluck asks his questions.
Okay? That was the public comment, so go ahead and start, Mr. Carpluck.
I just wanted to do like a few updates before we get into other things. The first one that came up was the use of the scoreboards outside. Can you just give us an update on what's going on with the scoreboards? Yes, the final electric work, it may have been done today. I didn't get a report. Our project manager is at his daughter's wedding. We had the electrician here several weeks ago, and then we had the snowstorm, and then the electrician got backed up. But the scoreboards are new. They're ready to go, and they're just finishing the finishing electrical work. Now, we presently have only one controller for the scoreboards, but we're in the process of getting the other two. Oh, well, they will have controllers when they'll turn over the scoreboards. The procedure is to get the scoreboards working, and then they give us the controllers, because then the company turns it over to us. No, I mean, and I applaud the music department because they want to perform. They have some, I'm hearing, creative ideas for the end of the year in a safe fashion. And like I said, the play is going on. The state, it's I think it's outrageous that they would allow us to do one thing and not another. So I know that the music folks are lobbying hard in Albany. The superintendents are supporting them, and hopefully, hopefully we're going to get news. As you can see, I mean, it's hard to keep up because the governor goes on TV or he goes to his press conference and he says things, but he doesn't always follow them up with executive orders. So it creates a lot of confusion. But we are, we're pushing forward. Indoor is still home only. We have gone the route, we're allowing visiting fans on the property. It's two per player at this point. But we are hoping to see, a relaxation of that as time goes on. We've also been reaching out to some folks. We're looking for some volunteers to help us with taping and live streaming, because it would be, it's cost prohibitive to bring in a company to do that. I mean, the number of games that we're going to have over the next several weeks, it would be cost prohibitive. So we've begun to reach out, looking for volunteers. That's a way for some people who want to see the game to get into the game. They could videotape it for us and we could post it, or they could live stream it for us. So that's something that we're working on. And what we're saying to everyone is, please, we don't want to be put in a position where the officials will stop the game, if the crowd gets too big. But we also, we're allowing visiting fans to come because we feel then they will reciprocate and we can go to their place. And I think if everyone stays calm, wears their mask, and stays socially distanced, we should be able to get more fans in as the weather gets nicer.
So the goal is to try to get as close to, at least the goal is to increase fans as time goes on, as long as things are proceeding well.
Yeah, the goal is to get back to as normal as possible, as safely and quickly as possible. Yeah, across the board.
Okay. The testing of athletes. Can you just go over how that works and why we're testing all the athletes?
That's by direction, or I will order, if you like, of the county health department. We test them once a week in the high-risk sports. Other counties are not doing it, but we've been directed to do it.
Okay, so theoretically, a kid could test positive on a Tuesday. We're doing the testing on Tuesdays?
I believe so.
So a kid could theoretically test on Tuesday afternoon after school. Does that mean that kids in the class prior, like, how does the quarantine work for a kid who's tested, for sports? Is there quarantine?
We go back and again, we'll do I don't even want to talk about it because we've had a pretty good run here for the last couple of weeks, but the contact tracing would be the same as if anyone got it. You know, we have to go back, look at the classes, look at the class sizes, were the doors open, were the windows open, how far apart were they wearing masks, how long were they, you know, and then you do the compass rows per the student in front and on the sides and back in the classrooms. So if it doesn't matter where you test positive, we have to contact trace.
Okay. So, in reality, we're testing, and kids who are testing positive are not allowed to go to school, even though we're not allowed to test prior to them coming to school.
Could you just repeat that?
So in reality, we're testing kids after school to play sports, and they will be excluded from in school, but we're not allowed, by state regulation, to test them before they come into school.
That is correct.
Okay. So is there any way that we can ask our lawyers to investigate how absurd that whole situation is?
You know, no one has been able to, you know, no one has been able.
The state said that was not allowed, and then they backtracked and said it's up to local departments of health. So now the kids are being held to a different standard because of a number of people in the Department of Health. That's not done statewide. It's not even done on the other side of 110.
You know, and we'll make the inquiry again with our attorneys.
Okay. The barriers. Can you explain why we're using the barriers or the face masks at the secondary level?
We were told by the Department of Health, if you're going to be in situations less than 6 feet, mask and barrier.
Mask and barrier.
Mask and barrier, and we did get permission to use the face shield, or, you know, face shield counts as a barrier.
Okay. So that's not us. We're being directed by the Board of Health.
Yes, and just to clarify, you know, the CDC says something, and then the state says something, and Suffolk County says something, and we have been very consistent all along, because Suffolk County has, and I give them credit, every time we call, they either answer we have a contact person there who who answers the phone Saturday and Sunday, morning, noon, and night, you know, 24/7, and we get a person who answers our questions, you know, so we've been riding with the county, you know, and I know it's confusing. You know, we had a situation about quarantining and the vaccination, and do you have to and do you not? And the governor made a statement on February 11th. He made a statement at a press conference, and it was never put into an executive order. So everybody heard one thing, and in actuality, it was not put into effect. So there's a tremendous amount of confusion because of the rules changing. So we have anchored ourselves to the Suffolk County Department of Health.
All right. So what's the plan moving forward for returning more of the students to the building and eliminating or reducing the virtual option?
Well, as you know, April 5th, we're going to be 5 days a week, and now we're looking at March 3rd, eliminating May 3rd. What did I say, March? May 3rd, which is the first Monday in May. You know, unless you have a medical note. You know, the normal procedure when you have a medical condition is doctor writes a note, and then we give that note to our doctor, and our doctor can talk to your doctor, kind of thing. So we understand that there are some people with you know, legitimate medical concerns, but we are looking as of May 3rd to eliminate the virtual option on the secondary level only right now, and we continue to evaluate the elementary.
Okay. So just a few things, you know, the other day, Dr. Fauci said that in the absence of science and evidence, that we make judgment calls, and that seems like a legitimate response. And I want to, you know, I know everyone's sick of me, but it's not enough to have the kids some of the kids in school 4 days a week, and now we're moving to 5, and it's not enough to give in and say, well, at least the kids are playing, you know, they don't have fans, but they still got to test, but at least they're playing, but they got to wear masks. We shouldn't settle for other people's, you know, misguided judgments. We shouldn't settle and be thankful for the small, like, morsels of normal that they throw down to us and be like, oh, thank goodness we're allowed to do this. You know, we need to move forward, you know, and not wait for September and not take small steps, but keep on moving forward to get this to be as normal as possible. These are our children, this is our community. In the absence of science and evidence, we should be the judge. I don't think we should give up our choices based on someone else's judgment. And my other point about that is all the things that we're talking about, the science and the evidence is in our favor, right? More spectators. The science and evidence is clear. We should have more. We should be allowed to have more. The barriers. There's not a shred of evidence that the barriers work. The evidence is on our side, not on the side of judgment calls. Full remote. The evidence is clear, it does not work. We said it when we went to live streaming, and there was all the anxiety about live streaming. We said it wasn't going to work, and the evidence is clear. It doesn't work for a majority of kids. Do some kids benefit? I'm sure they do. But for the majority, it's not working. And when there is evidence and when there is science in our behalf, we should be able to make the judgment. And I just hope that we continue. I'm very appreciative of everything that everyone's doing. I know we have to move cautiously, but eyes on the prize. Keep moving forward so that when we open in September, this is a long, distant memory.
You know, and I agree 100% with what you're saying, and I do believe we've been on I'll call it a methodical march. And we do have to respect the whole spectrum of people's feelings, emotions, opinions, and I do think that, again, if we're back in school on the secondary level May 3rd, you know, that it's also, think about the season, the windows will be open, the air will be moving, people will feel comfortable. You know, we took a pretty hard shot, but we're still standing. And again, I'm very proud of the folks that work here. I'm proud of the kids that go to school here. I'm proud of the parents and their support. It's been a very difficult time, but you know, and you know, we haven't even begun to touch on the end of the year activities. We just approved an appropriation for a tent. I know that the buildings are planning to do things in a safe, normal fashion. Maybe not as big as in the past, but you know, I'm very confident that we are starting to do the things we need to do. God forbid something happens, we can pivot and go in another direction. But I think if we continue this methodical march, you know, this is a big step going back to what we call the medical, you know, the medical option. You know, it's always been there. We've always had kids that are on medical. So there'll be a mechanism. I'll be sending out a message next week about, you know, how you can get, you know, come back, you know, call in after the holiday and get back to, you know, after the, you know, break and get back into school. And then the medical option where you'll bring us a doctor's note. We'll tell you where to send those notes. And then we will, you know, I think, you know, looking down the road, I'm going to be very optimistic about September. Very optimistic.
Are there local school districts that are presently using this medical option and they don't have a virtual school kind of
There
option?
is one that I don't necessarily want to comment because I want to.
But there are schools. There are examples of this.
Just one, yeah, just one. But they're a model that we're working with, and I want to make sure I get all the, you know, I want to have all the details correct.
No, I did bad.
What?
Nothing.
What? times.
I just, again, I want to thank you for letting me vent on a daily basis.
You don't have to thank me, thank, everybody else.
Okay, I think just one other topic that was brought up, the Regents exams. Do you have an update? And how will the grading policy, will we adopt a no harm?
Well, here's another one that is just frustrating, but it's a great example of what we've dealt with for the last 365 days, Because I do remember the day that I was sitting with Mr. Carpluck, and we said we will be the last school district to close. And we may have been, but we sure were wrong. We thought we were coming back in 2 weeks also. But the Regents exam, the state said a few weeks ago that we had to do 2 Regents exams. Then they came out and said we have to do 4. Right now, the state says we have to do living environment, earth science, ELA, and algebra. But the state is not, and I want to thank Mr. Manzo for, reading the details, because I missed this one, and when he said it to me, I went, what? They're not going to offer the Regents exams in the summer. Now think about this. They're going to offer it in June, but they're not going to offer it in the summer. So if a child doesn't pass it in June, what are we going to do? But also, one of the reasons we pushed back our end of the year calendar, which we're going to send out, by April 9th, is because we're not 100% sure what's happening with the Regents. They said we're supposed to give them, but the inequity around the state, and what I'm hearing in my meetings when I meet with other superintendents or, in other areas of the state, and, we've been lobbying our representatives the last couple of days, the inequity of instruction. I keep saying we were fortunate enough, and you folks, the board, made the investment to get a computer for every child, so at least we could, keep it moving forward. But there are districts that are handing out paper packets, and, that created all kinds of problems with grading and not wanting to touch these things. So the question that I got was, is there going to be a safe harbor kind of hold harmless policy on the Regents like we had last year with our, final exams? We can't write that policy till we know if we're even getting a Regents exam. So, everything is up for discussion. But again, we're at the mercy, and I just caution everybody, what you hear on TV and what you read in the paper isn't always what the direction or the directive that we're getting from the state. So there is sometimes a disconnect. So we will do our best to keep you informed. We'll stay on top of things, and I don't know one person in this district, and I've been, been fortunate enough to be spending a little bit of time with each teacher individually. I can say this with, with great confidence. I haven't met anybody here from the cafeteria workers, security guards, teachers, the adults in these buildings, they care about kids. So, when the time comes and we get something definitive from the state on the Regents exams, I'm confident that we will have a policy that's in the best interest of our kids.
Are these carrying graduation requirements, do we know?
Excuse me?
Are these Regents exams that carry graduation requirements too?
Go ahead, Paul.
That hasn't been determined either. That's still up in the air.
Okay, just to be clear, we did adopt the 21-22 school calendar. That will get pushed out, but the calendar that you are saying will be posted April 9th is the calendar of end-of-year events, not the, we adopted the 21-22 calendar, so that will be published tomorrow.
We have to double check it because we may have gotten Martin Luther King Day wrong on that.
Okay.
So I wanted to, it's
Let me
kind of year's
recount.
been, but
Okay.
the school calendar's been adopted. We have to look at Martin Luther King because there were 2 versions hanging out there. So we'll check that tomorrow. We'll get it up on we'll get it posted.
So the
But-
calendar that was adopted tonight, the students will be returning before Labor Day. And then the way that the holidays fall in September, they'll go 2 days before Labor Day, then 2 days the week of Labor Day, and then 3 days the following week. Be correct? I
They
think
come
so,
in,
but that'll
they
be
come in the
published, so-
2nd and 3rd of September, Thursday,
Okay.
Friday, then they're off until the following Thursday, Friday.
Yep, so just to be clear,
Yep.
the calendar of year-end events, subject to change, will be published April 9th, but people can plan their 21 vacation with the calendar that we adopted tonight, and know the holiday break and the 2022 spring break that we look forward to. We have the spring break coming up, and if there are no other new business, the next Board of Ed regular meeting, which Mr. Zachary will be chairing, I won't be here, Thursday, March 25th at 8 p.m. Motion to adjourn? There's nobody signed in. No, nobody signed in, yeah. All in favor? Motion to adjourn? All right, thank you.